I think everybody to a certain degree struggle with a tough conversation, but I think having a right perspective matters, which is nobody is perfect, and no matter how high performing you are, there are going to be good points that you're really good at. So as a great leader, it's actually about focusing on what are the things that we can push them on and what are the things that we want them to double down on in terms of their strengths. Everybody's perception is very different, and when it comes to coaching and driving motivation, or even people who want to have higher performance of themselves, it all has to come from, I think I'm better than that, and I want to be better than that, and I chose to be on that path rather than, oh, my manager said this, my boss said this, and so I need to be that. Welcome to another episode of Shannon Goh Podcast, where we discuss mindset, sales, and scaling strategies for business owners. My name is Shannon, and I've been in business for about 10 years now. We work with multiple different businesses, brought in over $40 million, ranging from the info space to marketing agencies to consistent 8-figure in terms of revenue. Welcome back, guys, and today what we have with me here is Kwan, my awesome marketing manager, and we want to go in depth about the ins and outs of team management in SME. So Kwan, I'm curious, why did you choose this topic for today's discussion?
Yeah, I think it's something that we are fortunate to be able to speak to thousands of business owners over the years. And one of the key common topic that really often comes up, right, whether they are in 5 figures, 6 figures, 7 figures, is that many of them lack the skills and ability to run self-motivated, high-performing teams. Teams that actually perform to a different level, teams that drive initiatives, so that they don't really have to go and work and push a team individually by themselves. What essentially we want to be able to find is team leaders, right, who can just drive initiatives so they don't really have to worry about anything else and basically focus on more on the big picture, which is essentially what the main business owner has to really do.
Yeah, it sounds like a fantasy for a lot of business owners. But I think that from my years of experience of managing different teams, I realized that there's actually a cheat code to that. And ever since that, I've been implementing some of the strategies that we'll be discussing in today's podcast. And hopefully it's going to help some of the people who are watching this podcast for today.
And yeah, I think one of the key things that I've learned over the years is that this doesn't come from some innate charisma or something that we are just born with. There's a lot of management books out there, a lot of strategies that people have actually been communicating, teaching. And I find that sometimes with practice, obviously, sometimes it's not really that easy, right? But anyone can really learn them. And if applied, right, what you get here is a powerful vehicle that moves forward smoothly to your goals, which means it's a team. They drive together towards a certain alignment and aim towards the vision that you have inside your mind. Okay, so Shannon, curious, right? What kind of mindset do you think is needed to have to manage a great team like that?
What is the kind of mindset to manage a high-performing and self-motivated team? 2 things came to my mind: culture, data, right? Culture and data, the reason is because the culture is going to filter out the right or the wrong people. In any high-performing team, we have a very strict culture, and we do hire and fire by the culture. That is across any of the companies that I've managed or I've helped before. Number 2 is definitely the data on their performance, the data in terms of their past actions, right? And what does the data say about them in terms of, so what is the kind of resources and what is the kind of commitment we want to give to that person that we're assessing in terms of a progression with them?
I see. Then what if the assessment comes up a little bit more negative? I think this is where a lot of people struggle with, right? Having fun conversations. Hey, you're performing right now. You're driving my revenue. This is awesome. This is great. So easy. But what happens if you have to go into and say that, hey, this is something that I think you really need to work harder on. I find that you're really not performing. This is really not up to standard anymore. Is this something that you struggle with?
I think everybody to a certain degree struggle with a tough conversation, but I think having a right perspective matters, which is nobody is perfect. And no matter how high performing you are, there are going to be good points that you're really good at, and there are going to be things that you have to improve on. So as a great leader, it's actually about focusing on what are the things that we can push them on and what are the things that we want them to double down on in terms of their strengths. So rather than saying that this is going to be a tough conversation, we want to go from the point of, hey, we have some observations and I'd like to discuss about those observations. And then we actually list out in a very factual format, these are some of the observations that I noticed about you over the past 3 months, and I want to pick out specific incidents about it, right? And after I mentioned about certain key incidents, I actually asked back to the person that is on the review with me and say, so what do you think about this incident? What is your reflection point about this? Do you think that it was a good job done? Do you think it's a bad job done? Like, what is your perception? Because everybody's perception is very different. And when it comes to coaching and driving motivation, or even people who want to have higher performance of themselves, it all has to come from, I think I'm better than that, and I want to be better than that. And I chose to be on that path rather than, oh, my manager said this, my boss said this, so I need to be that. You get what I mean, right?
I get what you mean. So interesting. So what you're trying to say here is that you bring them on a journey of self-discovery where they discover that they are actually not performing. It's self-realization rather than you informing them that this is the problem that is happening.
Yeah. In the past, I'm talking about 5-6 years ago. When I was how many years before I was a manager? I think it was like 7 years ago. I can't remember already. Back then, I was very intimidating. I go into the meeting room and, back then it's pre-COVID, right? I go into the meeting room and I say, hey, I don't think that there's many things I want to talk about, blah, 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 blah. And people normally find me very intimidating. As the time goes by, I realized that as long as you're objective, factual, and you give someone their space to speak their voice, there's always going to be a cordial conversation about it. So the trick is to get someone to think about what they think about what I've just said.
Wow, I see. Do you think this will circumvent the problem that a lot of business owners and leaders is having, where they have very strong relationships with their team members already? They have fun, they have dinners, they go out for drinks, you know what I mean? Yeah, there's going to be a little bit of a connection and stuff like that, right? So if you're doing this to bring them on a journey of self-realization, do you think it's going to circumvent the entire issue where it's hard for you to broach such a topic because you really have the rapport, the friendship going on already?
I like to say a mature person draw a clear line, and a mature person never ever cross that line when we're actually talking about certain specific topic. So I think what's useful for anybody who has very close relationship is always just start off with, this is nothing personal. And this entire conversation is actually more about, on the work context, what are some of the observations, okay? And what I need from you is feedbacks about what I said. So as long as, I think what is more important for a leader to practice is consistency in our behavior. You can't be talking about this point and the next time you're mixing your personal and your work in somewhere else with them. And then when you're back to the conversation here, maybe every single time you do a review, you use a different style. It's important as a leader to be very consistent with the style that you adopted and stay true to the style that is actually aligned with the culture that you have set. Otherwise, your team will be like, you're unpredictable. I don't know what you're talking about. I thought that we are friends. I thought that we are close. You're so harsh because the last time you were not harsh. And then the next time you say you're harsh. And then the next time you say you're objective. It's too unpredictable.
I see. So it's more of congruence in terms of behavior. So Shannon, will you recommend being friends with your employees or the team member?
Wow, that's a tough one. Of course, you cannot stop friendship from being formed. And how do I force someone to form friendship in the company? I just can't. I don't have the power. And neither does any of the business owners. So I like to say that the decision is not based on us. Okay? I think it would be a fool of us to think that that decision is based on us. But rather than that, we want to educate our company about, yes, you have your friendship and we have our work. And how can the leaders lead by example on how we personally draw the clear line to move things forward to achieve the company goals. That's why I always explain to our team members saying that we're not family here, we're comrades. We're comrades and we have a war to fight, right? And as someone who has a war to fight, we're going to give feedbacks, we're going to discuss about the hard truth, we're going to push boundaries, right? But in times of needs, we need to show support, we need to show love, right? But we're not family, you know? I like to say that because I like to remind that a family is unconditional. And in business, it is conditional. If you're not going to be a culture fit, I'm not going to be working with you. It's as simple as that. Why? Because it's going to destroy the culture. It's going to have inconsistency, right? And then it will lose what we have in the first place, which is to achieve the company goals together. So I actually disagree with the family take on business. I think it's a comrades kind of thing, and it's conditional.
Yeah, I've been through those journeys before where the company always aligns me that, hey, this is your brothers, this is your family over here. You need to be able to rely on the people around you. But then when I see things, I start to have expectations when these things are misaligned. You know what I mean? When I start seeing that these family members are being treated better than myself, then now the misalignment comes into play. Yeah, so I really agree with you here. I think it's really, there's going to be expectations involved when you come in here and put labels like this family inside a work organization.
And then to a certain degree, assuming that we put a scenario, some people say, oh, I thought you treated me like family. But let's put it this way. If I say, well, because you're family, that's why company is not doing well this year, we're going to take a pay cut, and as a family, we're going to stick through things together, the employee is going to be like, I'm not your family, right? I'm here for a job, I'm here for this, and I'm here for that. So my point is that when things are going well, people always say the nice things. But when things are not going well, and you use the same thing, oh, we're family, the responses is going to come out slightly differently. Of course, there's going to be people be like, yeah, we're going to stick through thick and thin, da-da-da-da-da-da. But I always like to say that nobody should practice blind loyalty in any company. I wouldn't, and I wouldn't tell my team to, right? But a rational way to predict, is this leader that you're working with, is that someone you want to work long-term with, and why? And it typically drills down to the values alignment, which goes back to the culture again.
I love that. Okay, so Shannon, so we talk about the idea of leading by example here because we want to work with people long-term, right? So to work with people long-term, you need to be somebody that people wants to follow. But what kind of attributes and traits does this somebody have, right? So that people want to work long-term with you.
I think first of all, you need to know what you stand for and what you cannot accept. Because like I said, even though I kept going back to the culture, but the culture is actually how the leader walk and lead by example in many different areas. I'm talking about hiring, let go, projects, how to deal with conflicts, and etc. Right? And when people follow someone, they want to follow someone that is reliable and trustable, that we can actually depend on their words that they say. So where are we going to find indicators of high reliability? It all goes back down to consistency of the way that you lead and the way that you have interacted and communicated. So part and parcel of being able to attract high-performing team to be retained and want to follow you is how reliable that you are. And also, what is the vision of the company that you talked about, right? And how did you manage to integrate their personal ambition and vision into the company goals? Because if there is a straight alignment from company goal to personal ambition and dreams and vision, and down to reliability of a leader that they will do whatever it takes to bring them to the finishing line together, then there comes that, okay, I'm willing to take a leap of faith. I'm willing to take a so-called potential pay cut. I'm willing to take a transition. I'm willing to take a long-term commitment. It doesn't come without any form of high reliability, I would say perception, at least from the employee side.
So setting a vision, then from there just driving towards a vision, setting alignment with the team member side, right? So that everybody's aligned towards a certain goal, right? Yeah, but Shannon, if this is the case, if you're already aligning towards a person, right, I think this comes a question here. Sometimes in SME settings, I think you understand this. It's very dynamic. So comes the question is that everybody says that SME has to be flexible too. How do we balance flexibility and keeping somebody aligned towards a certain goal?
I think that we are not expecting everyone in the organization to be flexible, but in my company, from my experience, I do expect our managers, our leaders to be adaptable. Because maybe the people on the ground might not be as adaptable in terms of like maybe I was doing one thing and now I need to transition to another team. Another thing, I accept that. But for the leaders of the company, they must have adaptability, and it's one of the prerequisites for leadership because no companies have no tough time, right? I'm talking about in the years like 1, 3, 5, 10 years. Every company has their ups and downs. And what allows them to go from down to up is actually the adaptability from the leadership team. Whether is it that the people on the ground, some of them might want to resign, some of them might want to continue to grow with you. It is the leader's job at the top to retain them and actually to inspire them and to encourage them to adapt and actually walk the path with them and show them what is adaptability. You cannot expect people on the ground to adapt if the people in the managers are not adapting to new trends, not learning new things, not being excited about innovation, not excited about a brand new project that they have not done before. It all starts from the top.
I love that. So this actually answers my question, right? In terms of what kind of traits does a great team leader has to have so that people want to follow you? Yeah, it's really being I think this answers my question about what kind of traits does a great team leader has to have so that your team members will really want to follow you. You know what I mean? Adaptable, making sure you drive new initiatives, always being willing to learn and learning from your failures as well.
I think you're a great example of that, right? I mean, you're in the leadership team. I think that the leaders have to be more enthusiastic sometimes even than the founders. And I think the reason is also because I've been in the business for 10 years, right? But being able to have a management team that practice innovation, that practice adaptability, and that practice creativity, and coming in here pouring ideas, giving insights, and pushing boundaries, that's what it's for. You don't want to have a management team that actually just purely listens to you. At least for a fast-paced digital company, I would say so. I wouldn't say so for other industry that I'm not aware of. But I think for a fast-paced setup like us, it is very important.
Okay, curious, right? Now that, Shannon, I know you have all of these traits, the idea of learning from your mistakes, your failures, taking things not personally, growing as an individual. I believe there are certain traits like that too, and it's something I'm learning as I'm growing. But how do we make this happen, right? These traits, instill them towards the team members that is around us. Do you have a method for that?
Yes. And you gotta tell them as it is when they don't practice that. So I think that a lot of managers tend to sugarcoat their words or they let it slide when people actually don't adhere to the values or cultures that we talk about, right? And they get away with that, then the bar and the standards becomes lower. So every time when I work with, people that I want to train or, managers that we, of course we have a lot of hard conversations, right? I say, one of the things I always like to ask is the standards that you gave yourself the same standards that you gave your team? And it always put all of you in a hot seat, isn't it? It's like, I'm a little bit too easy on my team or blah, 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 blah. And then the next thing is also how would you have liked to be treated on the other side, assuming that you are your team member? How would you have expected your leader to drive change in you? So the first perspective is, do you have the same standards? The second perspective is, if you were the person that is on a hot seat, how would you have liked to receive the feedback and how would you have want to be inspired to do better? So once you have those two perspectives, I think generally we are quite safe. But I always like to nip the person in the bud the moment that there's something that doesn't sit well with the company. It could be as simple as maybe they said they're going to do something and it was not done at all. And this is where I would actually say as it is. I say, you said you're going to do something like this. You said this is important to you, but nothing was done. How did you feel about it? Or sometimes it could be like, we recognize that those goals were the same things that you said yourself and you said you were excited to accomplish. And yet looking at the past 3 months, minimum progression was done towards that. What happened? Putting them on a hot seat and then letting them speak first. It is important to hear and listen first, because you don't want to form your thoughts before someone had a say in what they think. Once they shared, it also give us a lot of clarity about the type of person that you're working with. Are they someone who is victimizing themselves? Are they someone who take ownership? Are they someone that is self-aware? Or are they someone that's delusional? Right? I tend to like to hear people to speak first because you get to know who you're really dealing with, which is far more important than the review itself. What's the caliber of the person and how far can this person go? That is a constant decision as a leader we're trying to make, because you cannot push a person past the boundaries of what they're ready for yet. Ready for doesn't mean like being on a safe bar, but it can't be like, maybe they're here but you expect them to go here now, and then they're gonna crash and burn.
Oh, cool. I think a lot of people listening to this podcast, Shannon, can benefit from the kinds of questions you ask, right? To get this information from the people you're speaking to. You know what I mean? Like, how do you get somebody to actual self-realization? Yeah, do you have a list of questions? Is this something that you somehow can read the person? I think you have that skill, by the way. You can read somebody and understand their thoughts a little bit. Yeah, but I find that do you like a framework to be able to pull out this kind of information from people?
If I were to recall back how I always do my reviews, first of all, before any reviews, you must first do your prep work in terms of analysis and reflection about the person. Number one is, did the person have any breakthrough in their position and their roles and responsibility or the projects that they've handled? That's number one. Number two, did they have any fair share of setbacks or mistakes or things that didn't go so well, right? Similarly, okay, you have to list it all down, right? After we list it all down, we have to really dive deeper into the factual things that has actually happened. What resulted in the success? Was it by them or by someone else? What resulted in the setback? Is it by them or someone else? Or, sometimes it's a variation of reasons, right? And then afterwards, us as a leader, we have to go into the meeting not having a conclusion in mind yet, but we have a list of questions that we want to go into to explore with them, to be able to see if there's any coherence with maybe our perception of the matter versus their perception of the matter. Typically, you'll find that there's a gap. Because if someone thinks the same as you, they would have performed as the same as you. Makes sense, right? So it's X to Y, then there's a gap analysis, right? Where's the gap? You're not coming in here to condemn them. You're coming in here and say, okay, how can they be that? How can they go from X to Y? So the conversation is not discriminating, it's not putting people down, but okay, here's X and here's Y, right? You see things from X and I see things from Y. How can we go towards X? Because clearly it's not there yet. Then it becomes a very neutral conversation of, okay, how can we get there together?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. Wow. That seems like a lot of things to do.
It's decent. It's respect to the team members. I like to say the quality of the preparation that you have is a form of respect that you have to the person that you're working with. So even though I might not have time to really sit down and reflect, but I already do it for so many years that before I meet someone, those questions are already answered in my head, right? And when you go into the conversation, I love to first start with saying, first of all, today is going to be about, so same thing, like I talk about closing without selling, right? I use the exact 7-step framework. I use it on reviews as well. I say the purpose of today is really to look into your performance. And the purpose of today is also to look into where can you grow as a person? What are you excited, not excited about? What am I excited and not excited about with you? We're going to be able to practice some radical candor about it. That means that I won't be direct, but you can be direct with me too. Sounds good. Great.
I understand. Yeah, actually, the reason why I say that it's not, it sounds like something a lot that you have, there's a lot of things to do before you come into a review. It's because it's something that I'm experiencing right now. I reflect on a daily basis in terms of my team's performance. Then from there, I go inside, then I have a conversation with them, right? Typically, there's a little bit of judgments and conclusions inside my head already. But it seems like right now you're saying is that I have to empty my cup and bring them on a journey of self-discovery first. You know what I mean? But when you reflect, typically you have judgments as well. So I guess it's something where it comes by with skill and expertise and practice.
I think it's a tough line to draw in terms of we're all human, number one. But number two is also that there are some people that whatever that they have done is clearly not up to standard. So as a leader, it's also about understanding what's the bar and did you ever communicate about the bar? So my husband always like to say, you have a bar in your mind, but did you state the bar? And sometimes I think twice, maybe I didn't do it clearer enough. And then you say, well, if you didn't do it clearer enough, how do you expect the person to get the bar so that it becomes on me, right? So having our ego away when we're doing our conversations with our team is extremely important, because it's to look within, and then we also have to evaluate them. But the first question is always, did you have a bar, and did you express what the bar is, right? And if you have set the bar and they did not fulfill it by a huge margin when they could have been, because otherwise you wouldn't have set the bar, right? Okay, then that's a performance issue that we're talking about. And if it's a performance issue that we're talking about, we cannot sugarcoat it. You're not performing, and the reason why you're not performing is because part of your roles and responsibility is this, and that was not done. But I'd like to hear from you what happened. Right? I'd like to hear from you what happened. I will make my judgment, because at the end of the day, a leader has to make our own judgment. There's no right or wrong decision. There's just a decision that you have to own up to. Whether is it as a leader we fire people, or is it as a leader we retain someone that we felt questionable about retaining. Nobody cares as other than you, who have to own up to that decision.
So you set your expectations early, right? So you can always align them towards the promises that they have made, the commitments that they have made earlier, right? So there is nothing that, hey, actually, these things we talk about already. Yeah, we really talk about this. This is where we want to get to. But right now, it seems like there's incongruence in your behavior, which is why I need to have this conversation with you. It makes it so much easier to broach the topic and having harder conversations with people. Is that what you're trying to say?
But you have to say the first time when they didn't do it. When someone did not hit the bar the first time, you must let them know. So it doesn't come as a surprise the second time or the third time. And the next thing is, if you've seen it happening again and the efforts did not increase from them, then that is not just a performance issue, it's a person's issue. Do we want to put that person on a hard conversation about, are you even interested to stay in the organization? You play a crucial role, right? I need you to be there. And if you don't want to be there, where do you want to be? Do we actually have a role and a place for that person that is at what they want? And if we don't have, we're going to tell them, well, we don't have something like this, right? You can continue to stay. I mean, you're exactly performing okay, right? But if you want to have some career progression and you want to be somewhere that is pretty exciting for you, where it's tapping into your strength or whatever criteria that they mentioned, unfortunately, it seems like there is no fit. But I also had my fair share of learning experiences. So for business owners that's listening here, I make my fair share of mistakes too. And my mistake is when I give a feedback in a way that I thought in the way I would have received it. I would have loved to receive it. But sometimes not saying something is also very powerful as well. So let me give an example and a context. If this person has repeatedly not performed, why do you want to keep talking about it again and again already? You don't have to. You could have just gone into the meeting and say, hey, I think that our company has evolved and has transitioned to a certain place, and I'm starting to see a disintegration of the path, and we have to execute whatever hard decision that we're talking about here. It's either you change your responsibility and perform to this, or you could resign. What works best for you?
I see. So this is your benchmark towards hiring and firing. I see where you're coming from. I've experienced team members like this before, Shannon. Both of us have people who are more egoistic by nature. I mean, not to say that they won't be able to change, but
everybody has ego. I think everybody has ego. We want to be very careful with our words used, but everyone has ego. But my point here is, if it's something that's been talked about for 1, 2, or even 3 times, right? Do you really want to repeat that 4, 5 times? You don't have to anymore, because it is established that it led to a conclusion where you have to make a decision, and they have to make a decision. So rather than explaining and listing down all your observations, blah, 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 right? It's just as simple as, why not let's think about what other path would you pursue?
I understand. Yeah, I totally agree.
So you put away the path. Yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree that everybody has an ego. But what I truly believe, and my basic expectations of people, right, personally, is that they need to have the self-awareness to really put down their ego at times and take feedback that is given from a place of love. You know what I mean? Like, hey, I really want you to be part of this. I know that you need this, you want this. And right now I'm seeing incongruence in your action. So when I'm telling you this, please take this thing not personally. See where you can take the learning lessons from. And it's not easy for me to have these hard conversations with you as well. If they have this perspective, it's so much easier to give feedback, right? And learning lessons from the other people. So I understand ego is something that everybody has, but I'm very egoistic by nature. But I find sometimes being more open-minded to receive feedback like this is it's a valuable skill, and I find it's an expectation in an organization.
I think, but once again, here is that sometimes you don't have to go that deep in terms of a conversation with someone. Unfortunately, there's no hard and fast rule to leading people, having hard conversations with people, terminating people, creating a promotion, career progression path of it. There's no hard and fast rule. And I think in the pursuit of bringing the company to greater heights, there will always be mistakes that's done. There will always be things or conversations that could have been done better, because everybody that you're having a review is so unique and different. We have different level of ego. We have different level of self-awareness. We have different level of interest in terms of like how hard we want to work, right? Or how badly we want to grow to a position, right? And you can't expect people to be like you and vice versa, right? It took a lot of years of retrospection, of reflection to really look at things like this. That's why I say there's no hard and fast rule, but I like to go back to intuition. My biggest mistakes when it comes to dealing with a high-performing team or training a high-performing team is to not rely on or to not listen to my intuition enough. Sometimes there's always that intuition that at the back of your mind, there's something that doesn't sit right with you. There's something that was a red signal. There's something that you felt could have addressed sooner than later, but you felt maybe I should just put that aside and give that person one more chance. Maybe I should just put that aside and maybe I thought too much, or maybe that should be wrong. Or maybe you talk to someone else and someone else said otherwise and you did not trust your instinct and you trust someone else's judgment. But you are the leader that is managing your team, not the other person who gave you a feedback. And like I said, that's why in leadership, there's no right or wrong. There's only a decision that we own up to, right? So every single time I made a mistake in hiring or progression or working with anybody that I work with that I care deeply about, is that I ignored my intuition. My husband always say, you have a interestingly precise or strong intuition about certain things that typically is right. So I don't know why you always ignore your intuition. It's a hard lesson. It's a hard lesson that I learned last year.
I see. Oh, yeah. Do you think this intuition and all the skills that you mentioned earlier, right, Shannon, something that you were born with? Or is it something that you learned over the years?
No, it's not we are born with. I don't know anything about what spiritual things or, what forms intuition. I'm not going to go there because I have no competency in that area. But I like to believe that intuition is made up of, number one, knowing what you stand for, which is coming back to your culture and your values, right? Number two, right, the history or the actions of someone, which is the data, right? And number three is tests. You have to regularly test, and Ray Dalio says the same, right? You have to periodically test the same person in different things again because people change. So if you test someone once 1 year ago and 3 years later you don't bother testing, then you're wrong because people change. We get married, we have financial burdens or responsibilities, and it evolves someone to become maybe different, right? So regularly test. But when the moment the test is, the test has a red signal, you cannot ignore that signal. It was something that is a red signal. And you must think about, do you really want to ignore what is the repercussions if you do ignore it? Or how do you confront it? You know what I mean?
I know exactly what you mean. So you test, then from there sometimes you fail. You learn the lessons that you from what you fail. You get better. You take the lessons with you. You apply them into your everyday life. Then you grow as an individual. You know how to handle these situations a little bit better.
Oh, no. I'm referring in the context of as a leader and I'm working with my team. Back to the topic of a high-performing team, right? That means that, first of all, a high-performing team year on year must have adaptability. With no adaptability, you won't be able to build a high-performing team, right? Now, as we evolve year on year, the market change and the people change. The people that you work with change. But when they change, do you know that they change? And to what extent have they changed, right? That's why we need to do the tests. Like the test of like, sometimes you assign them a simple project. And sometimes it could be seen the way that they made a mistake and how they address the mistake. Sometimes is, let's say, if the team had a success, how did they deal with the success? Is it all their credit? Is it their team's credit? Or is it a balanced way of actually mentioning who are the people? It's also looking at a leader, how we evolve when there is a stronger team member in their team that they have led, maybe surpassing them or being as good as them. How do they actually deal with such situation? That is all the tests that I'm talking about.
This is where I actually just listened to Ray Dalio's podcast once, right? I mean, I read a lot of his books, but one of the key things he talk about is that for leaders, we need to have, I think this is also our alignment, the commitment to always get better. Because in my opinion, this is where I come by in terms of my perspective for job security and how I actually put these expectations for everybody else inside my team as well. I find it's important for people to really create more value in an organization, right? Especially in an SME setting. If not, somebody will eventually replace you. Like what you mentioned, even those people that are, how I put this, people that you're managing downwards or managing around you, if they start to really get much better than you, it's going to be super noticeable because you're not creating enough value. Over time, you'll be replaced entirely. Yeah.
But I always like to say that motivation that comes from a space of fear versus motivation that comes from a space of curiosity and fun. One typically leads to burnout and one typically leads to excellence. So it's an interesting observation. Let's say every single day we are in a fear that we're not good enough. We're in a fear that the market is moving too fast and we have to constantly outbid the market. It's coming from a stem of like, I need to do this because if I don't do this, it will be that. I need to do this, if not, I will be that. And it's again and again reinforcement, 365 days, you know. And it really dim down someone's light because it's reinforcing that if you don't change, you're not good enough. But it's true. I don't shy away from the fact that it is factual in a fast changing market. But what mindset can we wear that can drive a longer term motivation and excellence, right? And fulfillment. It has to come from the place of curiosity. It has to come from a place of, I know why I want to grow and the joy that it brings me from growing. Yeah, because otherwise I see a lot of high performers. They start off high performing for like maybe 3-6 months, up to 9 months, and then they're like, I can't do this anymore, making mistakes. Or, you know, sometimes they might even hide their mistake because they don't want to be seen as a failure, right? Which is all in their little mind. And the truth is everybody makes mistakes. I do too, right? But that's what I mean.
I see. Cool. Okay, Shannon, just now you mentioned about this particular point, right? I'm really learning a lot from this conversation. I mean, even from this bouncer, because there's lessons I learned from you, but it's always reinforcement inside my head when we talk about this. I think one of the key things I really want to talk about is the conversation where you mentioned about radical candor. You know what I mean? Yeah. So I think this is a skill set that you have. You are able to package information in a way that comes off very radical, right? Like perspectives that people don't see in a very candor way.
I'm just straightforward from a space of love, right? But I also make my fair share of mistakes, which is why in my earlier part of the podcast I said sometimes things is not required to be said. Sometimes if things are saying too many times, It could be you as a leader trying to force someone to be somewhere that they shouldn't be, or you're forcing someone to be a certain mold where they're just not. If someone repeatedly make mistakes, not because they're not working hard enough, not because they're not doing their best, adapting and etc., but it's simply they're just not performing no matter what resources or training or opportunities that you've given to them. Perhaps it's you. You force someone to be somewhere that they should not be. Because the feedback is always coming back to you the same, right? You put them to the same thing, you put them to a slightly different thing, and it's always the same feedback. But this person is working hard, this person is contributing, this person, the team loves them. Then the problem is you. So that's why I say putting our ego aside and recognizing that the problem might be us is very important. So sometimes I think about, is the problem me? And then chances are, it probably is.
Such a hard reflection point to have sometimes.
Okay, what can I do? Right? What can I do what move can I make that could be a different move than the same move that I've done a few times and it did not work out for that person, right? And if I used all my move,
the easiest way to circumvent that is just to ask the person, you know what I mean? Yeah, what do you actually want to do?
Sometimes they don't know. Sometimes they don't know. I have encountered people that they just say, I really don't know. They say, I have no ambition. I don't know what I want. But I'm happy. I like to do what I do. Okay, so how do you deal with that? Right? Not everybody come in here with a, I want to achieve great things. I want to da. They still want to achieve great things, but maybe just not with the whole organization. And you just got to accept that. Not everybody is going to be so like, I want to be, working really, really hard and contributing. Not everybody is going to be like that. I learn a lot from my husband. And he always reminds me that sometimes people just want a good life, stable pay, do the same thing year on year, and you can rely on them to do the same thing year on year, and they will always be there, and they'll always do a good job for you. So how do you put a value to that? Because that's reliability as well. But of course, there's a ceiling in terms of the compensation plans that we can develop, blah, 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 but it doesn't mean they're not happy with that, and it doesn't mean that they don't know that. If you deal with MNCs, you deal with SMEs, there are some people who are just going to be like, I'm happy with my current job. I don't want to grow, right? I just want to stay where I am for now. Right? Maybe they have a side thing that they are doing that they love. Maybe they treasure more family time and etc. That's why, yeah. I slowly learn and I reflect on that point and say, yeah, we are right. That's why the hiring matters. That's why evaluating someone's past during an interview process matter. Understanding their lifeline kind of matters too. It's an interesting topic itself, but I like to encourage everybody to spend more time with a person during your hiring process and shortlisting process, rather than when they come into the organization. You really want to break down every single thing in terms of their value compass, what's the most rock bottom moment of their life, how did they pick themselves up, what do they have to say about that, who's their role model, when did they actually took the chance to pay for a course or anything to upgrade themselves, why did they do so, right? Have they ever thought about starting their business, why and why not? What's their perception of loyalty? What's their perception of excellence? Getting to know their past is a good indicator of how they will react and behave when they do come to the company itself.
It's interesting. I think one of the key things that we talk about as well is Ray Dalio once mentioned that, right? A really high performer, a performer that you really, really want to keep is somebody that puts your organization above yourself. I mean, it's a very controversial topic in my opinion because a person has so many priorities, right? Yeah, and like you want to prioritize your family, stuff like that. Of course, prioritize those. But I think if you prioritize the well-being of an organization above yourself, right, you're just doing your job. Essentially, what you're doing is fulfilling your given set of responsibilities. You're committing to growth because over time you understand that everybody can be replaced, right? You're driving up an organization. Is that something you truly believe in as well, Shannon?
Putting out the organization above ourselves.
Uh-huh.
Yes and no. Let me piece up my thoughts.
Controversial,
Number
right, this
one.
question.
Number one, do I expect my business unit leaders or my leaders in general to put the company above their interest? Yes. The reason is because if not, then why are you called a leader? And the whole leadership idea of why does leaders eat last, right? It's because we are able to put the company's interest above our personal interests. But yet at the same token, it's the same thing as, okay, would you turn up on a Sunday to do a podcast with me if you didn't put the company's interest above your personal interests, right? And part of it is also why you get your rewards and your recognition, right? And everything is a win-win. Whatever efforts that we put into the organization, it will also come back to us in terms of a win-win, right? So I do expect the leaders to put the organization above themselves and their interests because that allows them to bring the company to the company goals. If you're acting in terms of your personal interest to go towards the company goals, how could you even reach that? You can't, logically speaking, right? So it's a logical statement that I think Ray Dalio is making. But number two, putting the company's objective above a personal interest doesn't mean not taking care of our health. Doesn't mean throwing ourselves off balance at home. And what is balance, right? And doesn't mean that we are not... I think the whole point here is that a lot of people put this statement as like a controversial thing because they see it as, oh, maybe I don't sleep well because I work too hard. I don't eat well because I work too hard. Maybe I cut out my social life because I work too hard. No, it's actually not about that. They're highly productive people that is achieving amazing achievements like outputs at work and still being able to have great health, great connection at home, great relationships that people find fulfillment being around with them because it's their being. And people confuse their being with putting the company's interest first. Do you get what I'm trying to say?
I get exactly what you're trying to say. Yeah, I find that whatever you're mentioning here right now, right, Shannon, essentially they are always going back to a few root culture and values that a person is supposed to have, right, to really drive an organization forward, to really be an A-star player. You know what I mean? Yeah, accountability, personal responsibility, putting the company ahead of yourself, being able to have principles like understanding from failure, removing the ego whenever necessary. Yeah, essentially these are all the values that a A player really has to have, right?
And resilience, right? I think resilience is incredibly important. And it's about, because I think in the pursuit of putting the company's interest first and knowing that you're going to get a win-win from there, right, is that sometimes you would be working OT, sometimes you'll be working OT, sometimes you'll be going above and beyond for a team member that maybe you didn't really want, but you need to. Or maybe you have to have tough conversations with people that maybe you don't want, but you need to, right? But the whole point here is that when you do all those things, is it because, I need to? Or is it because, I do want to because I want to grow and I take it as a challenge and I understand that the company needs me to and I want to do that for the company. And the reason why I want to do that for the company is because I see a win-win relationship, that the more that I'm able to create a certain form of results for the company, there's a certain path that is open to me as a result of that. So nothing is blind loyalty, nothing is a win-lose transaction, right? And win-win doesn't come from incentive, it comes from incentive, it comes from growth, it comes from transformation in our being. Like, I like to say that how far you can go in your success is your being. Like your caliber of a person, your level of resilience, your level of adaptability, and your level of creativity, and your level of self-awareness. Because if you can achieve that year on year, nothing can stop you even if you fail. Nothing can stop you.
Powerful. Okay, Shannon, I think we are approaching towards the end of the segment. I want to end it off and ask one question here, right? Initially, we talk about culture fit, the mindset needed to manage a great team. So what essentially constitutes a great culture? We circle back to the fun.
Wow. Okay. So I think that what constitutes a great culture is every leader can set a different culture. In different industries, sometimes need a different set of culture that is specific to the industry. So let's say, for example, if I'm running an auditing firm or I'm running an accounting or a legal firm, being able to understand transparency or integrity is like a undisputable value that must be in that company and that leader, right? So there's no right or wrong values, but a set of values that you, number one, go and look into the highly successful, fast-paced or fast-growth companies. I love to do that. I like to do some research first and look at a set of values that they already instill in their organization. And ask yourself which of these values is equally important and pivotal for your own company's growth. That's the first question. Number two, right? How do you define those values? Because how each company defines those values is very, very different. How do I define this value in a personal token, in a company token, and in a leader's token, right? The representation of that. And really, really note that down. And then from there on, we have to ask and bounce back with the team and say, okay, this is a set of values, right? Rank number 1 to I will pick 10. This is a culture exercise. You pick 10 and you get the team to rank 1 to 10. The top 5 value or the top 6, 7 value that's most important to them unanimously, then that is the values for the company. Because what you think might be important might not be what would everyone believe that is equally important. And sometimes as a business owner, we lose touch on the ground, You're like, it's all in my head, I'm the best. But it's oftenly not lah. The team knows best about you. I think the team knows me better sometimes than that is a good reminder to myself. Like they see me a certain way. Okay, I am a certain way like this. Okay, I should stay that bar. So to wrap this up, for those of you who are listening to this podcast on how to run a highly effective and self-motivated, high-performing team, I'd love to just do a quick recap for everyone here on what we have discussed here for today. Number 1, we have repeatedly talked about culture, but it's not just about forming the culture. It's also about how do you define the culture from a personal standpoint, from a leadership standpoint, right? From a behavioral standpoint, right? Number 2 is about having the hard conversation, having the uncomfortable conversation and changing your perception about this is not a difficult conversation, but this is a conversation for alignment. And this is a conversation to be able to help them to grow, to hit the same goals together. I think we discussed a lot of different topics about there's no hard and fast rule in terms of leading people. There's no right or wrong decision when it comes to leading people. It's also just about simply owning to your decision that you have. Of course, I discussed about some of the great questions you can ask when you're actually having a one-to-one conversation with anyone. But I think that even from this podcast alone, I hope that you guys have been able to take away a lot of things you'd like to implement in your company. Please let me know via IG. You could IG DM me, right? You could let me know via our email, right? Some of you got my email because you're in my community, but please talk to me via IG. Tag me on IG that if you're listening to this podcast and you gain value from this podcast, it means the world to me and my team. If you're watching this from YouTube or Spotify, please subscribe, leave a review, drop a comment, right? I get incredibly excited. My team does too, so that our efforts doesn't go to waste. So I look forward for the next podcast with you where we continue to share more in-depth about the different topics that we talk about, and we'll see you in the next episode. Please subscribe or leave a review if you have gained value from it.